How are y'all approaching the question of inequality?
Jackson is a city, like many cities, that doesn't have a problem producing wealth. It has a problem maintaining wealth. All of the money that's made in Jackson between 9 and 5 just happens to be out by 6. And so that means that our greatest exports are our money and our talent. And so we're looking at how we reverse that trend.
Really assessing what the needs of our community are, and then being intentional with the type of development, the types of supplemental resources, and the types of opportunities that are really necessary to lift those people that have been either underemployed, unemployed, or quote unquote left behind.
Richmond has 25% poverty. 40% of the children live under the poverty line. And so we have a city that's attracting high wealth and a lot of investment, creating millionaires year on end. But how do we go about involving those who've been living in Richmond for a number of years? And so we've taken a concerted effort, an intentional effort in wealth building, particularly focused on job training.
I'm the first African-American mayor in 180 years. So over the last 10 years, what we focused on is creating that infrastructure, creating that base that we can build on. This is the age of technology.
That's right.
And because these factories aren't going to come back, we've got to educate our people along the lines of technology so they can work at these jobs we look to attract our cities.
When dealing with the launch of Straight Outta Compton, the remake, and dealing with the movie studios and really talking about, okay, what does this mean for my community? I learned that those supportive industries that make pictures and make movies work, they earn 6-figure incomes. And so how does my community connect with that upward mobility? And so I brought our college on board and connected them with our unions, and so now we're looking at how do we create our own cinema training program that can create a pipeline to Hollywood and create not only just Hollywood, but how do we create our own Comptonwood? I believe that we need to create our own opportunities for our people so that at the end of the day we all can live a decent and a dignified life. And it doesn't mean that it's going to come from the national level or the state level. We have to do that at the local level.
As people ask the question to me after Donald Trump took office, the Wednesday after, I shared with them that I woke up in Mississippi, which means that no matter whether Donald Trump is president, Barack Obama, Clinton, or Bush, Mississippi has always been at the bottom. Right? And so it is apparent to me that what is going to change that dynamic is what we do locally.
In Aurora, we're in 4 different counties. We have 6 different school districts. We have about 4 different state reps, 3 different state senators. So we got to bring all these people together on the same accord so we can communicate and effectively make change in our city.
In places like Baltimore, Detroit, a number of people look at the police as the occupying force. What are some of the ways that you've actually dealt with those dual issues of the police and trust issues on one hand and then crime on the other?
We had a year in 2012 where we had 0 murders in the city of Aurora. Wow. Now, that's huge. Wow. It's because we implemented programs, for example, like Weed and Seed, where we weed out crime and blight, and we seed it with opportunity and prosperity. What we had to do was teach people how to communicate, and so we could understand each other, empathize and sympathize, and recognize what we needed to do to address our issues at a root level.
In being honest with ourselves, we have to acknowledge that our country has become far too dependent on a criminal justice system. We all say the phrase, crime doesn't pay, right? The reality is crime pays very well. If crime stopped tomorrow, our economy would crash. Look at all of the law enforcement we have. And then we look at the prison systems. We have the attorneys, we have the judges. And so we've become too dependent, and all of that requires that we over-criminalize our society. Yeah.
The nation still has not dealt with appropriately the war on drugs, the drug epidemic, and really how that decimated a generation of communities everywhere. And it's not a black issue, it's not a white issue, it's a people issue. And people in our nation are still dealing with drugs, and drugs have causal factors that tear down the fabric of your families, of your community, and as a community, as a city, we have to augment those. And so my first month on the job, I had a community policing task force launch, but we focused on two different areas, not just intervention, but also the prevention aspect.
So I was wondering if you could talk about maybe some of the public-private partnerships you've engaged in at the city level, and then how you've been able to kind of navigate that with still giving people the right to determine how their city functions.
It's about who is calling the shots. Is the taxpayers and the people in the city calling the shots, or the private sector calling the shots? And I think we should be ones calling the shots. We created a partnership with two nonprofits now that 20,000 children in Richmond public schools can now receive vision screenings and free eyeglasses. I tell you, I went to this event, this woman came to me and she said to me, and it will always stick with me, she said, you know what, my son was a recipient of one of your screenings, and he's 7 to 8 years old. I did not know that he was blind in one eye.
Wow.
7 years of his life, he walked around in school blind in one eye. He left school that day with a pair of glasses. Now, I'm always going to stand up and raise my hand and say I'll be a part of any partnership that involves investing in our children as a positive for the city. But if the city's going to be left holding the bag, I want no part of it.
One of the things that we focus on with public-private joint ventures within our administration is really looking at additional services that can be provided to the community that the city is not in a position to provide. And that example is like post-traumatic stress syndrome counseling. PTSD is extremely high. About 95% of all folks living in the urban community has some degree of post-traumatic stress syndrome, and it's already statistically higher than even those folks that come back from serving our country in war. And so we reached out to Venus and Serena Williams, and the sisters collectively decided to launch the Yetunde Price Resource Center that focuses on helping people that have been affected by trauma, as their family was actually impacted by trauma, and the center is named after their sister who was gunned down in Compton many decades ago.
We see gentrification as a war against the people. It moves people from one state of misery to the next. People who are already suffering are pushed more to the periphery and further away from all the resources that aid them. And so I think that we have to look at how we abandon the traditional model of how you develop a city. Traditionally, we look at building great edifices, nice new buildings, and we push people away from being able to obtain those things. I believe in the process of collective genius. I don't believe that one person has all of the answers to all of the problems or all of the ideas, nor one administration. I believe we're smarter together, and so I submit myself to that process, and I submit myself to critique. I'm of the mind that if Green Bay can figure out how to own its own professional football team, then Jackson, Mississippi can figure out how to own its own movie theater. Well, I come from a family of organizers. I tell people we have some great organizers throughout history, you know, the Martin Luther Kings, the Marcus Garveys, the Medgar Evers. But the greatest organizer of all time is oppression. As the community has witnessed the threat of the state taking over the school system, we've seen people crossing party lines, people who normally don't organize or work together have come together for the mission of working for the benefit of our students. And so my tagline was, this is where the radical mayor and the conservative governor come together to get the job done.
I sit here today, I would not be here if it wasn't for college kids as the 80th mayor of Richmond. And so I lean into young people in our city having a voice in our city, not just during presidential elections or whatnot, but ensuring that they actually can participate in our city.
I actually give power to the people and let them take their city back, because that's the only way to create sustainable changes, when you have a community that is educated, engaged, and empowered. And that's the only way. And that's the same is true for our own nation.